time. We will first. We will start out the meeting with the election of officers. But before we get into that, we would like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll get into the election of officers.
Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so calling to order, we need to establish a quorum. At this point, need to identify each member of the board that's here, and then we'll do introductions of staff. So Constable Westover present. Constable Pikes.
Constable Bruno. Constable Pikes present. Bruno present.
Major Divins.
Bivens present.
Okay.
Foden present.
Okay.
Okay, we have established a quorum of board members. We are going to, the next thing that's going to take place is nominations for the board chair. Do I have any nominations for chair for the Constables Education and Training Board?
I nominate John Bruno here, nominates Craig Westover for chairman.
Constable Westover, do you accept this nomination for chair of the board?
Need a second. Is there a second? Sure.
Well, doesn't he have to accept the nomination first? Or what you're willing?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm willing to accept the nomination, but we need a second for that.
I'll second
I'll
that
second
nomination for Craig Westover.
Should we do a roll call vote?
Okay. Can I have a roll call vote on that, please? All those in favor?
Bruno, aye. Bruno, aye. Pikes, aye.
Bivens, aye.
Norwood Foden, aye.
Motion carries. Okay, then we'll move on to vice chair. Do I hear any nominations for the vice chair position?
This is Pikes. I'd like to nominate Mr. Bruno, please.
Constable Pike, I understand you're nominating John Bruno for the vice chair position. Constable Bruno, are you willing to accept that nomination?
I will accept that nomination.
Do I hear a second for that?
I'll second that. Norwood Foden, second for John Bruno as vice chair.
Chris Norwood is a second. Can I have a roll call vote on that, please?
Pikes, aye.
Bivens, aye.
Norwood Foden, aye.
Over aye. Motion carries.
Next, I'll just go into staff introductions.
Yep.
Next, I'd just like to introduce staff that are on this call as well. We have today Sherry Leffler, the supervisor for the Constables Education and Training Program. John Fow, the manager of the Bureau of Training Services at PCCD. Tracy Beaver, Constables Education and Training Program. Nick Hartman, Constables Education and Training Program. Megan Staub, who is the Bureau of Training Services curriculum manager. I have Sally Berry, the office director for the Office of Justice Programs. Teresa Ford, who is in our fiscal management division. I have Dorothy Jacobelli, who is also in our fiscal unit. I have Deborah Sandiford, legal counsel, PCCD. Are there any other board PCCD staff that I'm missing? Darren Myers, also the office director of Office Financial Management Assistance. Any other PCCD staff on the call that I did not recognize? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Then we'll move into action items at this point. Each action item, I'm going to ask the board member making the motion to approve or second to approve. State your name and record for each motion. I'd like to do a roll call vote for each of these because of the blend between the hybrid and the public. Sometimes it's hard to hear everybody, and I want to get a roll call vote so that it's properly denoted in the minutes of the next meeting. So that's how we're kind kind of run the approvals on this. So the first action item is going to be the unapproved minutes of the November 4th meeting, and I'll turn that over to Nick.
Hello, thank you, Chair Westover. The meeting minutes for the unapproved minutes for November 4th, 2021 meeting, those can be found on pages 3 through 10 of the board packet. Did you want us to read or point out anything in particular from the board meeting minute?
Well, I guess my question is, I want to make sure, has all the board members had an opportunity to review the minutes of the prior meeting? If they have, what I'm looking for is an approval to accept the minutes as stated. If there's any particular questions about that after we get a motion to approve, at that point, we can hammer out the details. So do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes of the November 4th, 2021 meeting?
Fights, I approve.
Okay, we have a motion
I make
for,
that
from Constable Pikes. Okay, and a second. Any questions, any changes, or any discussion on any of the items that was on the minutes of November 4th, 2021? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote. All those in favor, state your name and
Bivens, aye.
Bruno, aye.
Fights, aye.
Norwood Bowden, aye.
Westover, aye. Motion carries. We'll move on to our next action item here. Unapproved financial report for the February 10th, 2022 meeting. I believe that is Dorothy.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The fiscal report is on for this quarter ending December 31st, 2021, fiscal year 2021. It can be found on pages 11 through 16 in the board attachment, beginning on page 11 with the statement of cash receipts, expenditures, and commitments. The balance carried forward from the previous fiscal year was $2,478,756.38. Fees collected through 12/31/21, the end of the second quarter, were $625,370.46, which is $81,572 ahead of the same period prior fiscal year. The total funds available as of December 31st, 2021 were $3,104,126.84. Under expenditures and commitments, the total cumulative expenditures as of 12/31/21 were $330,431.98. And the total cumulative expenditures and commitments for as of 12/31/21 were $3,268,641.10. That includes $363,899.16 in administrative expenditures and commitments, and the breakdown of those commitments and expenditures is found on page 12, which includes $65,422 in fees collected for trainings. The total uncommitted funds as of 12/31/21 is negative $164,514.26. Does anyone have any questions?
I do have a question. So on the fee collections, you just talked a minute ago about the money that's been coming in, but I'm looking at page 14 and, no, excuse me, not 14, page 15. So I'm looking at page 15, and if you look at the last column under 2021-22, down the lower right-hand corner, it says 21-22 fiscal year projection, $1,596,298. I'm running the numbers, trying to compare it to the quarters that we saw last year, with the collections and in 2021. So if we optimistically, because I'm looking at how we've done so far this year, but I'm looking back 2 years ago prior to the COVID, really is that 1.5 still viable? It looks to me like it's going to come in more like 1.2 to 1.3. And I guess I just want to get a comment from you as to what your thoughts is on that.
Well, I can tell you that last year we came in at 116, and this year already we are running ahead 81,572 from the prior fiscal year, the same at the end of the second quarter. So we are running slightly ahead, and and historically, the fourth quarter has been our largest. I mean, last year, the fourth quarter was when we received most of the more fund fees revenue than the prior three. So I don't know, whether we'll meet that 159 projection, but I do think that we are definitely going to come in ahead of last year. We are trending ahead already.
I get worried, when I'm looking at our numbers, because I'm looking clear back on this report, back to 2012, 2013 fiscal year, where we had 1.9 million come in. And, as you can see, in 2021, we ended up at 1.1. So that's been my concern all along is, we've done a lot of things to get financially stable, but I worry about, do we have enough here to continue on, or are we going to be back down around that 1 million mark, by 24, 25, somewhere in that time period. So.
And what I'd say, Mr. Chair, is we may see, in the next quarter, because as the courts have started to open back up and there's getting to be more work and the eviction moratorium was lifted, I hate to say, but are we going to get a bump out of that, a pickup in that work that's been on hold, lack of a better term, for the last year and a half? So maybe the next quarter might give us a little better idea of what's out there. That's, of course, just because it gets assessed now doesn't mean we get it collected, within 60, 90 days.
Right.
It can be assessed and we don't see it for 6, 8, 10 months. So.
Do we have a good handle on, the counties that are contributing with AOPC? Is there any way that we can generate that report, the counties that are actually putting money in, where we can take a look and see, is it because there's nobody working in that county, or there's a decrease in the number of constables that are out there actually serving, or something else going on?
Right. To get to that level of detail, we'd probably have to do like we did several years ago.
Yeah.
Where we submitted a very detailed request to AOPC by county. And we asked how many dockets were assigned, was the fee assessed? And then was the fee collected on that? And we did that over a 5-year look. And that's where we found out that on the assessment of the fee, we usually only get 40 to 50% in the same year it's assessed. And then it trickles in over like the next 4. We'll get 20% the next year, 10%. So,
and we had found it was almost 18 months till we were collecting some of the fees, the $5 fees.
There was an average of 15 to 18 months from the time the training fee was assessed to the time it was actually collected and got to us. So we could go back and look at that request we submitted to AOPC. I think it was about 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And we could probably get that crunched and to the board, because that showed a very good by county. It's interesting because it didn't really matter. There was a few exceptions. Some counties, we were getting 60% or 65% the first year, but nobody was getting us 80, 90% in the same year it was assessed. So.
Well, that's what's always been difficult for me to wrap my hands around, is why that $5 fee doesn't sound like a lot. Why it takes so long to get through the pipeline to us. But then I found, I think when we talked before, you may only get 50 cents or $1.
And that was the other issue that came out. $5 might be assessed, but for whatever reason, it's later waived, or, we get $1. I know when Judge Opiella was on the board, he used to comment that there are MDJs who might reduce that they're trying to help the defendant out or whatever, but.
Or may not be assessing it as well.
Right. Or it doesn't get assessed at all. So we can reach back. We've done that before, and we can work on that, for the next meeting.
I want to say we looked at like 2010 to 2015 or.
Yeah, within a 5-year span.
Yeah.
And you may also want to look at just filings in general, because from my perspective as a court administrator, I know we've seen a reduction in the number of citations that are being filed across the board. So of course that would have a direct correlation with this, any kind of warrants that may be assessed or issued. So that might also be another figure you want to look at is just filings in
Right,
general.
Well,
Yeah,
that is a good point. That really
Yeah.
is, because it does directly impact on
correct.
the amount of work generated.
Right. Also coupled with the fact that the technology is improved for defendants to pay.
Hey, wow,
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
just gonna bring that up.
Yeah, so I mean, with e-pay that AOPC has offered, we've seen an increase in people being able to pay in full upfront and not going on payment plans where they would default. And then a warrant would be issued subsequently. So I think that there's a bunch of factors right now, from my perspective, that are impacting whether or not, we're able to assess that CETA fee on warrants and things like that.
There's just a drop in work generated that
Correct.
gets to the point of issuing
Correct.
to a constable. So, and that's what I was gonna bring up, because I'm trying to remember when AOPC rolled that out. I think it was around 2012, 13. They only did a couple counties at a time. So back then, we got 1.9. There was on average more work to be issued to constables, but once AOPC put out the go online and pay with a credit card,
Right.
that reduces how much work's available to be issued.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, any other board members have any comments or questions on this financial report?
Yeah, John Bruno here. As I'm looking at page 15, I see the totals from fiscal year 2012 through the present. Is there any way that we can get a breakdown by county? I know what you're talking about, John, is the CETA fee, or Craig, the CETA fee. But I
yes,
would like to
yes,
see a
Constable
break.
Bruno, that's kind of what we were just talking about. Staff has done that in the past, and we can do that again. We can submit that
Yeah,
request
just
to
to break-
AOPC.
Right, breakdown by county, because that would be interesting to review that. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Any other comments from any of the board members? Hearing none, then I'll ask for a motion to approve the financial report.
John Bruno, make a motion.
Okay, John Bruno, motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second Norwood Bowden.
Norwood's going to second that. Roll call vote, please.
Bivens, aye.
Bruno, aye.
White's eye.
Norwood Bowden, aye.
Westover, aye. Motion carries. Very good. All right. At this point, we'll run on to instructor certifications, and I believe that will be Tracy Beaver, who will give us a report on that.
Thank you, Chair Westover. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
There are five instructors that Penn State University, the JASI department, has put forth for review and approval of the board. The first one is Terrence Barneau. He is requesting certification in the general and physical skills topics, and his criteria is listed below on the board packet, and staff recommends board approval for Terrence for the topics listed above. The second is Jonathan Caranese, requesting certification for the topics of general, physical skills, and firearms. Staff have reviewed his credentials and have put forth the recommendation for board certification in the topics listed. The third instructor is Rachel Grabiak, and she is requesting certification in general and physical skills. Staff recommends that the board certify her for those two topics. The fourth instructor from Penn State is Patrick Nuzzo, and he is requesting certification in general and physical skills. Staff also recommend Patrick for the topics listed above for board certification. And the last instructor from Penn State is Harold Shane. And he is requesting certification in general communications and physical skills. And staff do put forth his recommendation for board certification for those 3 subjects.
Okay, so you had a number of names that have been put by you, and you had the information to review. Do I have any questions by any of the board members about the ones proposed for approval? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the instructors that were presented for approval.
I'll make that
John
motion.
Bruno,
Norwood
make that
Foden.
motion.
Motion to approve. Go ahead, Bud. John Bruno, seconds.
Okay, I have a motion to approve that. I have a second from Constable Bruno. All those in favor, please state your name and for the roll call vote.
Bivens, aye.
Bites eye.
Bruno, aye.
Norwood Foden, aye.
Lester, aye. Do I have any noes? Or do I have any abstentions? Motion carries. And I believe, Tracy, we have the second part, which is a request for exception to board regulation and eligible waiver applicant.
Yes.
I will
Go ahead.
take that one.
Sherry's going to take that? Okay,
Yep.
very good.
So in the board packet, staff had received a request for a reply to a rebuttal from an ineligible waiver applicant for the law enforcement basic training waiver application. I had responded via email to him on January 17th, and I did provide the attachments as well. This individual is requesting that his waiver application be reconsidered before the board. And I've also provided there the current board regulation that states that the reasoning why he was deemed ineligible as an applicant. Did the board have an opportunity to look through this action item and also the attachments that I had provided?
I did bring along the information that you presented to us, the packet with all the regulations and that. So I've had a chance to review. Trish, how about you?
I have.
Other board members, have you had a chance to review that?
I have.
Yes.
Any questions about, the information that's been presented to you or staff's recommendation? All right, not hearing any discussion from board members. I'll open up to public comment. Public comment, I want to remind you that it's limited to 2 minutes. If you so choose to speak, please give us your name and your home county where you're based out of, and I'll open it up to public voice at this point.
Thank you to the board. This is Constable Michael Ludwig. Just briefly wanted to give an explanation. It was my contention, I was trying to convey to Sherry, that I believe I do actually meet the current wording of the regulation. I was employed as a full-time sworn police officer at Fort Indian Town Gap, Pennsylvania. It's a municipal trained by MOPEC position, required by statute to have MOPEC training, yearly MOPEC certification. I was active as the regulation meets to meet the training and certification for employment at the time I retired. It was less than 2 years since retiring when I submitted my packet for the waiver. It's a Commonwealth police officer, working for the state, MOPEC trained, all the training and certification required at the time to complete the job. I just feel like she was getting hemmed up on the MOPEC card, where the statute doesn't require MOPEC to give us the card. I am required to take the training and the certification, very similar to Capitol Police in Harrisburg. Their statute just has extra verbiage that gives them the MOPEC card. I had the same training as Capitol Police, same certification, same requirements. It's our sister organization at the time. So if there's any questions, I'd be willing to entertain those, and I just appreciate the consideration. Thank you.
Constable Ludwig, this is John Fowl. Have you been issued a MOPEC certification number?
Negative. The statute does not require that MOPEC issue us the certification number. For all my training, MOPEC just uses my Social Security number. But I could print out all of my MOPEC certifications over the years. They were gracious enough to give me a printout with all of the training. I'd be willing to forward that, but it's all listed out in the spreadsheet.
Any other comments by staff or by any of the board members? Any other public voice comments?
This is Constable Abraham Smith, Westmoreland County. Okay.
Constable Smith,
My
go ahead.
question is, yes, sir. How many personnel does the board expect to provide basic training for in the current year? We just had a new crop of constables elected, and I'm wondering how many you expect to train in basic training this year.
Okay, that will be covered here shortly in the agenda, so we will be talking about those numbers, okay?
Okay, the one other question I have is on page 12 of the fiscal report that you covered. Halfway down the page, it says checks deposited for class reimbursement, et cetera, $65,422. What time frame does that cover?
Where's she referring to that?
That is for the entire year of 2021. So January 1 of 2021 through December 31st of 2021.
Okay, thank you. So in other words, that is how much was paid in by constables and deputies for all their training in that year.
For the basic training and the basic firearms that were held in 2021, that is correct.
Okay, and the fees that were collected consistently have never been less than $1 million. And I'm just trying to, I think myself and anybody looking at these figures is trying to wrap their head around when you're facing a cost of over $2,600 per person for basic training. How can we be told that the board can't find $65,000 or so out of this $1 million in fees that are collected to lessen the burden on new constables in taking the training? There's a lot of people that heard from their predecessors, well, the training's provided. No, the training's provided. And we know this was changed a couple of years ago. But as I said, we're hitting that first crop of people after the municipal election who are running right into this $2,600 wall. And there's a lot of people wondering why this isn't being covered anymore.
Well, one thing's for sure, Constable, we have audit reports from the State Auditor General's office. As we look down through, and they've been consistently auditing. How many audits have we been subjected to?
Since about 2010 or 11, we've had 5 audits.
So we've had 5 audits, and we've been clean on the audits, and there are expensive. How much time do they spend here when they do an audit report?
We just went through an audit, and I would say it was probably 5 or 6 months. I mean, from the time they started to the time they issued their report.
Okay. So part of the issue is truly the amount of money that we have to run the program, the training program itself, our expenses, and the Auditor General's report really details, all the money that's being spent or collected is staying within the program. It's not being, sent out anywhere else for any other kinds of programs. But if I understand right, what we're charging for basic training probably is not even a break even. We're probably still a little bit short on what we're actually charging for basic training as to what it costs to actually do the training.
Well, and like the one thing we don't add into that cost is curriculum development. Every year there's a cost to develop curriculum, develop training every year, but we don't calculate that into the basic training cost because, basic training doesn't change that much. I mean, there's minor updates if there's statutory or rules of procedural change, but those changes are very minor compared to when we have to build a brand new, 20 hours or 12 hours of continuing education. That's a lot more than going in and having somebody update civil law or criminal law because of changes.
Right, so I guess what I'm getting at my last point is if somehow the legislature came up with, say, $100,000 specifically to cover the costs out of pocket for the constables in the current year, that would be more than enough to cover this like $65,000 that you used last year, that we paid last year, and that we're going to have to pay, the people are going to pay this year that are taking basic training. We're talking less than $100,000 is what you would need to prevent people from having to pay this out of pocket.
Well, and as I've said for probably 20 years, that's an issue for constables to go to their legislature, their reps, and talk to them. We have not had a surcharge increase. It has been at $5 since 1994. And we have trained, I think, and the numbers will be later in the meeting, but probably over 4,700 constables, deputies have gone through the training over the life of the program. And so we continue to train more and more constables. But as you heard us discuss earlier, the amount of the surcharge has never increased. And, the work is not getting to the point where a surcharge is assessed because people can go online, pay their, minor summary offenses or whatever. That was work that was issued to a constable and we get a surcharge. So the amount of court work that is getting a surcharge assessed is getting less and less, and our costs of training go up and up.
And in 2019, that is when 2018, we had a work group of constables and board members that got together and came up with training reduction plans because we had to reduce the training in order to stay flush of the training cost. Because as John said, the revenues are not meeting the cost of training. And I just wanted to point out one of the main reasons behind the board making the policy to have constables and deputy constables pay for basic training and basic firearms beginning January 1 of 2020 was because the last election cycle that we had in 2016, the program trained over 506 constables and deputies, and one of those constables or deputies performed any work for the courts. And when this was determined and brought before the board with courses of action and recommendations, the board's action was that if you were going to be vested into the constable occupation per se, you are going to have to pay for those costs up front. So that's where, going back to the original question that you had on what generated that, the cost for the constables to attend basic training, and that is the background behind that.
Yeah, Sherry, John Bruno here. That's what I was going to bring up because now there's an investment that they are making in their future to work for the courts. So that's very, very important going forward. That's all I have.
Thank you, John.
Get back to the action item.
All right, we're gonna move on then to discussion items.
Well, no, we got action item. We still have to vote on this.
Okay, okay. So moving back to the request for exception to board regulations for ineligible waiver applicant. I need a motion from one of the board members for that. Are we sticking with staff's recommendation? And if that's what the recommendation is, I'd like to hear a motion from one of the board members.
John Bruno, we will stick with the staff recommendation as presented.
Cheers. We need to.
Okay. I have a motion from Constable Bruno. Do I have a second? I'll second that. Any discussion?
Can you tell what the motion is?
Okay. So the motion that we've made is to deny the request for exception to board regulation for ineligible waiver applicant. I have a motion. I have a second. Roll call vote.
John Bruno, aye.
White's aye.
Major Bivens,
Bivens, aye. I'm sorry, I must have talked over somebody else. You didn't hear me.
okay.
No, it's the nine.
Westover, aye. Motion denied. All right, we'll move on to the discussion items, and I'll turn that over to Sherry.
The first discussion item I have for today's meeting is my supervisor's report. And I apologize for the lateness of getting this out to everyone just yesterday. So I'll go through it very briefly. I'm not going to go through, every statistic. Basically, I just wanted to give an update on the 2021 training, which that is all provided there. I also wanted to point out before I begin that in the last 30 days, the constables training program and specifically basic training for constables was one of the top 2 most searched items on the PCCD website. So we are getting a lot of hits on the website as far as the basic training and the constables program. 2021 training, basically we had 70% of the constable population complete the online and classroom modules for last year, or subjects for last year. We did have 125 constables that did not complete either 1, 2, or none of the online training classes. We did get analytics from Temple University on those individuals. Those analytics are being uploaded under the Constable's County information, under other documents section, so that you can go in and you can see that activity verification that we did get back from Temple. There were no issues with any of those 125. We had no activity on subjects, online subjects, and therefore they have to meet the training requirements for 2022 in order to be recertified. As far as this year for training so far, we had our first 2 Con Ed classes, January 29th and 30th in Lancaster County. We had 50 constables go through the 8-hour defensive tactics subject matter. We have 39 in-person classes scheduled this year for Con Ed. We have 40 annual firearms classes scheduled for this year, the first of which were just last weekend, also in Lancaster County, February 5th and 6th. So far for the online subjects, we've had 13.5% complete crisis intervention, 101 out of 749 have completed. 10.3%, which is 77, completed legal updates. And these are just updated numbers as of Tuesday. So I figured I'd give you the most updated numbers. And then service of criminal warrants, we've had 11.1%, which was 83 completed. And I must say I was very impressed this year because in the first 2 weeks of online going live, we had almost 10% of the constable population completing those online subjects. So, and that's really good because I'd rather see that statistic at the beginning of the year and not having 80% of the constable population finish it in November. So I'm glad to see those numbers are, coming up. And then as far as that and the annual firearms classes this weekend, we did have, I forget, I don't have the exact number here, so I'm not going to say that, but we did have 2 annual firearms classes last weekend. So far this year, staff have assisted almost 300 newly elected constables and deputy constables. That is the initial, registration in the SET system, assisting them with getting their election certificates, appointment orders, paperwork from them, getting them approved in SETs, and then working with them on getting their basic training enrollments and the class payments. The basic trainings are on a first come, first served basis. So basically the individuals who provided their basic training enrollment forms and their class payments, as we receive them, they date stamp them and then assign them, the numbered order of which they were received. Right now, we have 154 constables and deputy constables currently in the SET system. 42 of those are still awaiting approval, which means we are waiting on their election certificate or appointment orders. And we have 90 that have paid and are enrolled in the first 3 basic training classes. So the first 3 basic training classes are full. We are not keeping any waiting lists for these classes or reserve lists based upon the number of people that we're talking with on a daily basis. It's just something that is not realistically something that staff would keep up with and maintain. We have confirmed a fourth basic training class in Lancaster County. And because we are still receiving enrollment forms and class payment for the classes that are already full, we are contacting those individuals first and giving them the opportunity to enroll into this class before it is publicized to the general public. Basic firearms courses will follow each one of the basic training courses. However, the numbers are less for the basic firearms than they are for the basic trainings. So if we could get 30 into the classroom basic training courses, but we can only do 25 on the range. So there may be a few individuals that are unable to get into basic firearms this year that did basic training, but when we are scheduling for training year 2023, we will ensure that we have a basic firearms course scheduled as early as possible in 2023 to catch up those individuals. Right now we have 3 approved training, law enforcement basic training waiver applications that have been approved by staff. We have set up a testing date on February 22nd to have those individuals come in and attempt to take the waiver examination. We are still mailing out 2022 ID cards every Tuesday when staff are in the office. We will, print out a list of ID cards that need to be printed, and we will continue to do that because we are still receiving action certificates and appointment orders. As John stated earlier, the final audit, there was no findings for either the constables or sheriff and deputy sheriff's programs. We also had the instructor updates and recertification sessions that were held here at PCCD last December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. We had 12 board certified instructors for chemical aerosol, 14 were recertified in expandable baton, and then we just held another session for MOAB recertifications, and there were 18 instructors that went through that then as well. And then the active and certified numbers, right now, when I did these stats last Friday, we had 670 active and certified. And I did put there also what that statistic was for active and certified in April of last year, which was 883. Firearms certified, we have 521. In April of 2021, we had 727. So our numbers are down a little over 200, both for the base certifications and the firearm certifications of where we were at this time period in 2021. Any questions, comments, concerns about any of my information I just presented?
I just want to comment to the board that when we looked at last fall, there was roughly 800 or more constables in our system that were up for reelection and reappointment. So we probably still don't know the full, how many guys retired or didn't run again. So I think that's one reason the numbers are down until we get a better feel of who got reelected and they get their paperwork in. Those numbers are probably trickling up just a little bit every week. So.
Yeah. Because we're still receiving paperwork. I mean, there are some counties that still have not appointed their deputy constables yet. So those numbers will continue to go up as we progress through the year.
So it looks like the numbers are going to balance out. I mean, so you've had a turnover of folks, but you got new folks coming in.
Right.
So it looks like we're going to probably stabilize out around 800 to 900 people.
Right. We'll probably get back to I say by the year end, we'll probably be back to that 800-900 we were last year.
Sherry put out a lot of information, questions or discussion with board members or the public on any information that she's presented.
Just one last thing I'd like to put out there. February 12th is one of the biggest insurance expiration dates. We were still missing over 350 insurances in the system that will expire on Saturday at midnight. So if you have not renewed your insurance or you have, and it has not been updated in the SET system, please make sure that you check with your county clerk reports office to ensure that they're forwarding that on to PCCD. Right.
Okay.
Okay, Abe Smith, Westmoreland County, with one quick question.
Go ahead,
Okay,
sir.
Sherry, you said there was 90 paid and enrolled so far this year, and there was one more class later in the year. How many slots do you anticipate in that class?
We are actually able, because this is a bigger facility, we're going to be able to enroll 40 into this fourth basic training class at Lancaster County.
Okay,
Because
so best
again,
case
we still
scenario.
have COVID protocols in place as well. So we are trying to, social distance in the classrooms and those types of things as well. So that's why we were keeping that maximum number at 30 because the facilities couldn't accommodate them. I'm sorry, you were saying something else.
Yeah, I understood. So the maximum we're gonna have, is about 130 being trained this year,
That is correct.
basic training. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? All right, then let's move on to the second discussion item, which is board regulation revision. Sherry or John?
Well, I could start. We are working on an initial draft of the board regulations. So we just wanted to get some preliminary information out to you, to the board on this. We're hopeful to have this draft out to you for review at the May 5th meeting, so that we can start this discussion. The last time that we went through the regulation changes, it took us about 3 years from start to finish to get everything through. Basically, it was just like some housekeeping things on how we will, present things to the board in the regulations. If there's, underlined text, that means it's an addition. If it's struck through, then that means a deletion. Those types of things. We're adding footnotes to the regulations to indicate where board policy was put into place, or it reflects the current policy. Anything else you want to add, John?
Right, so our intent is to send the board a packet prior to the May meeting, because as Sherry said, we want to be able to explain why we're recommending a change. It might have been a board policy that was implemented over the last couple of years that probably should be reflected in regulation, or those kinds of things, or some of the things that have changed over time. And so I just want to, put out there that this is a very specific process by the Independent Regulatory Review Commission. In fact, even how we construct the document, as Sherry just talked about, a strike through or whatever, they have formats and there's all these documents staff have to prepare. But we want the board to go through and be very cognizant of what we put in regulation, what we change, and how we do that. Because as Sherry said, this process goes through this very strict kind of process and coming out the other side. And every time we've done it, we've never had any major point where it's been kicked back or, people object and there's all kinds of changes. Even if everything goes well, it could be a 2.5 year process. So by the time we get those regulations in place, we don't want to have to turn around and change them, a year from it, a year after that. So that's why we want to make sure the discussion we have, probably over a couple of meetings, it's, good, and that the board looks at the packet and really reads through it, brings any questions to staff so we can research something, or we can, if there's an issue that we need to discuss and provide, historical information or statistical information to the board, that we have time to do that, so the board can make good discussion, have a good discussion, make good decisions on the regulations. So.
And several sections of the regulations that we did put into this document were pertaining to the lapse in certification and attending, having to attend the basic training course after 5 years. Because these sections of the regulation have been questioned and brought before the board for additional action, we felt that maybe it's time to look through all of these sections. So at the May meeting, we will bring more information, courses of action, those types of things to the board as we progress through this. But that was one section that staff felt that, hey, maybe we need to go back and look at this a little bit closer. And maybe it is time to revamp some of the things that we do with the law enforcement waiver application.
You think this is something that we can be ready to vote on like in November, fall meeting?
Yeah,
I would love to be able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, and it
Is it
depends.
realistic? Is it realistic?
It depends on the
So-
course of the discussion, and on some of these issues. Because obviously at some point, there may be questions that go back to legal or, and all of that. Because even once the board says, hey, this is what we want to submit, it's still going to go through that legal review, et cetera, before we even send it to IRC. So there might be something that has to come back to the board.
Yeah.
But if we can get through this and have a good, do our homework and read this stuff and really make cognizant decisions, I think we could have a good draft by November to then continue the process.
Because it is an extensive approval process even internally here at PCCD. And then once it leaves our hands, then it goes to the policy office, the budget office, the House Judiciary Committee, the Senate Judiciary.
The Attorney General.
The
And all-
Attorney General, yeah.
And at some points along this process, those entities, they have a max amount of days that they can sit on it to review. So, and I don't recall the timeframes, but it might be 30 days or 60 days. So there's timeframes where it's just sitting and another agency or entity in the legislature is reviewing it, and they may provide feedback or comments or whatever. So each point along the way, it could end up coming back to us if there was something that somebody out there, you know, and I wouldn't say opposed, but they want clarification, or they don't understand what we're changing and why. So that's part of why it takes so long.
Yep. And then there's also parts of that process where once we get that final document through all of the, I'll go quote, state organizations, then it would go to the Pennsylvania Bulletin. Then once they publish it, then it's open for public comment. Then when it goes to IRC, there's also a public comment period through the IRC, which Independent Regulatory Review Commission. So it is a very long, drawn out process. And you know, if somebody from the public comments, then those comments come back to staff. We have to provide answers within a certain time frame. But if there's no public comment, then that, you know, time frame, of course, would then be.
So we're looking 2 years.
Right, but we want to make sure we have the best product possible when we submit it.
Right, and when we give it to the board, so that we can, you know, have those discussions that we need to do and just keep this process moving along.
Yeah, very good. Any other questions from any of the board members about this? Good. Hearing none, we have another informational item. This is from Sherry.
At the November board meeting, I believe it came up during public voice, but the board had requested that that the agency check into the availability of the liability insurance for constables and deputy constables. So I did reach out to the Pennsylvania Insurance Department, and they verified that the list that had been provided to them was all accurate. There were just a few minor changes to that, but actually about 82% of all the constables and deputy constables utilize one of these insurance companies or producers on this list here. And then this list will also be provided to the attendees at the basic training class and also published on our website.
Well, I'll tell you where it came from was me, because, you know, I've had the same company, Capital Indemnity, for 26 years. Got into the business, that's who I, you know, originally went with, and I stuck with those guys every year just because the price was about the same every year. You know, there was no, and I had no issues with the company. It was a great company. So back in the fall, my renewal is different from a lot. Instead of February, mine's in December. So in December, or I should say in about November, late October, I got a letter. Hey, we're no longer writing insurance for, you know, Pennsylvania constables. And so that's what brought my question to staff was, hey, who else is out there? Because I called my broker to find out what we're doing here. Well, the funny part of it was Capital Indemnity then apparently just changed their name, because they're now Capital Specialty Insurance Company. Same address, same phone number, and the whole 9 yards. But what I did suffer was about a $200 increase in my insurance premium from what I always had for over 26 years to what I've got now.
Yep.
It was about $200 and some change. So, you know, why it went the way it did, I don't know, but you know, I got reinsured basically with the same company, just a different name. And so I don't know if it was some rate, you know, review thing they didn't have to do by how they maneuver it. I don't know. I don't know, but you know, I got reinsured. But and the reason I brought it up is I didn't know how many constables across the state were using Capital Indemnity, and at that point, I had no knowledge that they were going to just come back with a different name and re-offer the insurance. But when you get the letter in the mail saying, hey, you're canceled, you know, as of the end of the year, and by the way, we're not going to write you anymore, then I got a little concerned. So
Yeah.
That's what brought that all about.
Well, and it is in the regulations or the statute that we do look into that, you know, on occasionally to make sure, you know, that it is available. The availability of it is there.
Okay, do we have any other business to come before the board? Any of the board members, do you have anything at all?
I do believe we're having a workshop, next week. Am I correct on that, John?
Correct. Thursday, the 17th of February. And in fact, I just sent out to the workshop participants the agenda as well as some background information. And I would ask that they look through that before coming to that work group.
Do we know how many have, signed up or responded to you as of yet?
Yes, I've heard from, I have 16 people have responded. Some will be here in person, some will be joining virtually.
Okay, great. What about our vendors? Are any vendors going to be attending that work group, or is it just constables?
It's just the constables, board members. We do have 2 MDJs. One is a former board member. The other one was a constable for a long time and just became an MDJ. But I think it's important to have their perspective as well.
Okay, great.
That sounds good. That's good. Any other board members, just anything for the other business?
Nothing from
Okay,
business.
hearing none, we'll, go ahead.
I think you just said nothing.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the public voice portion of the meeting. So for public voice, at this point, we'll open the floor to public voice session. Each person who requests a comment prior to the meeting will be announced separately. Please keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. If you have no public comments or questions, please indicate so. And do I have Tracy? Does she have a list of folks that have signed up for that?
Yeah, Chair Westover, the only person who requested was Constable Abraham Smith,
Okay.
so.
Okay. Abraham Smith, anything additional that you want to talk about today?
Oh, yes, sir. Just one last question. That work group you referred to a moment ago, is that just for board members?
No, there was, we had a work group in 2018 and we had reached out at that time and had various constables from around the state and as well as board members. And so we reached out to them because there were things that came up in the 2018 work group that were never fully developed into recommendations for the board. There were things that came out of that. So we wanted to kind of continue that work on some of those issues. So we reached back out to those participants.
Is there any way for anyone new can register, or is this something that's by invitation?
Right at this point, I was going to keep it to the participants we have.
Okay, thank you.
Nobody else on the list. Tracy, do we have anybody else that's come into the meeting since we started that wants to comment? All right, then I will request a motion to join the meeting. So do I have a motion to shut the meeting down?
I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? I'll second
John
that.
Bruno.
Oh, John Bruno, you're willing to second that motion?
Yes, I will.
Okay. All right, roll call vote. All those in favor of adjournment?
John Bruno,
Niven.
aye.
Whiteside.
Westover, aye.
Norwood, aye.
Ford, aye. Any negatives or any abstentions? Motion to adjourn has been passed, and we will conclude the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank you.